a new destination. Look at where the church was going. Every day they continued to, let's read it together, to meet together in the temple courts. So you had the temple, right? So we got to picture Jerusalem. We got to picture the temple, right, in Jerusalem. And then just outside the temple, you had the temple courts, very large area. The temple was only for the priest, and the inner part of the sanctuary of the temple was only for the high priest, and he only went in there once a year. But God's people gathered in the temple courts. It was a public space where God's people could come and they would gather. And when you read the Bible, when you read the New Testament, I challenge everyone, read the New Testament, and you're going to see, pay attention, what were they doing in the temple courts? And what you'll find is that they were gathering in the temple courts to worship God. That God's people would gather in the temple courts to hear God's word taught. They would go to the temple courts to pray, offer prayers to God. And they would go to the temple courts to give their offering. I got to thinking about those four things. They gathered to worship, pray, hear God's word taught, and to give their offering. And I thought, well, that sure sounds a lot like what we do here on Sunday morning. That this is a public space that God is, we're the church, right? These are just four walls. But this is a public space that God has given to us so that we would gather together as God's ecclesia, so that together we would worship God, offer our prayers to God, listen to God's word taught, and we would give our offerings. This is the public space that God has given to us. Look at what it says in Hebrews 10 about gathering together. And let us consider how we can spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Let's read it. Let's read this line together. Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing. But let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing. What that teaches me is that gathering together is a spiritual discipline. If you're not showing up to church, I know we have extenuating circumstances. I know people are in different things are going on. But sometimes we don't show up because we're not disciplined enough to show up on Sunday. So my mom, she's right here. You can ask her. And in her testimony, she shares that when she first became a Christian, she would go to church so long as there was nothing else to do. She would go to church, but if somebody called and said, hey, we got a birthday party at Tropical Park, she would take us to Tropical Park instead of taking us to church. She would go to church, but if somebody called and said, hey, we're going to go to the beach, we're going to go to Miami Beach, everybody's getting together, then she would take us to the beach. But as she started to mature in her faith, she started realizing, wait a second, I'm only showing up to church if nothing else happens. No, I got it backwards. I got to make this place a priority. And then let everything else fall into place. I'll show up to the party at Tropical Park after church. I'll go to the beach after church, but I got to be here with my family, and I got to raise my kids in God's house.